Good afternoon, everybody on the call. Thank you for taking a few minutes out of your afternoon to join us for a member-exclusive call with Senator Bill Cassidy. I'm Wendy Warren. I'm your VP of Communications for the LRA. And before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items. This meeting is being recorded, and we're going to mute your lines so we don't get any feedback. For the time being. We're grateful to have Senator Cassidy with us today. He's offered his time to discuss what we're calling the state of play in Washington, D.C. We've held numerous restaurant roundtables with Senator Cassidy through the years, and he's always been willing and ready to discuss our issues. And we also have joining us on the call Matt Walker. He's the Vice President of Government Affairs for the National Restaurant Association. And Matt has worked with Senator Cassidy for a number of years, and he'll be available to elaborate and answer any questions that we might have on some recent advancements or discussions. We also have on the call National Restaurant Association Chairman Melvin Rodrigue, and we have 2020 LRA Chairman Peter Sculfani. So with that, at this time, I would like to turn the floor over to Senator Cassidy.
Hey, thank you, Wendy. And I have two people from my office on that have 202 area codes. If you could also unmute Katie and Ron, my voice is going, and they can also provide some additional detail. First, clearly coronavirus is having a huge impact, particularly on restaurants. I always use the example of K. Paul's closing, an iconic restaurant that you never would have thought would have closed, yet it has. Melvin has been fantastic, by the way. Melvin Rodrigue and I have spoken on multiple occasions regarding this. He's also spoken with my staff. Similarly, Matt Walker, your National and Louisiana Restaurant Association have been great advocates for what is taking place. It is recognized by the president and his team that restaurants are particularly vulnerable as employers and as businesses. If those who are dependent upon tourism are particularly vulnerable to the effects of coronavirus, that obviously includes a lot of restaurants in Louisiana. It's a bipartisan issue. I spoke to Donna Shalala, who's a freshman congresswoman, but formerly President Clinton's HHS secretary. And she says there's only 9,000 people that live in Miami Beach, or maybe it's 90,000. But with their tourism, it is the equivalent of a population of millions. Well, with tourism down, with beaches closed and with bars closed, the tax base for that community has been decimated. And then we can also imagine that's because of the bars and restaurants being unable to open. So we continue to have issues. How to address? I'll ask Katie or Ron to speak to the particulars of the Restaurant Act, because there's some moving parts, which frankly, I've been in coronavirus lockdown myself. And so they can give us a little bit more of an update. But I know that I was just on a call earlier this afternoon. There continues to be a push for a second round of PPP. And for the PPP, it would be a little bit more restrictive. If you seem to have done okay or are doing okay, you would not be eligible. But if you could show that year over year, that your income is down 35% or so, then you would be able to be eligible. There continues to be a push for that. Secretary Mnuchin has been speaking about allowing full deduction for business meals for the next 2 years. Now, all this is subject to negotiations, but where the White House is that if we again allowed full business deduction, then that would stimulate use of restaurants and begin to restart the economy. Now, by the way, let me pause there and say parenthetically, clearly negotiations have broken down between the White House and Speaker Pelosi. And Pelosi wants 3.5 trillion, and she's willing to cut that in half. And Republicans are saying, well, we think you started off pretty high to begin with, so can we find some place that's a little bit closer to reasonable, as just opposed to half of where you started. Actually, not half, about 3/5. And so there continues to be a little bit of a breakdown. But what, again, we're told is it's not just money, it's also policy. And there's a lot of things in the HEROES Act that is unrelated to coronavirus that may or may not be good policy. It has just never been discussed in Congress, at least in the Senate or, in committee in the House. And so should we really be enacting it in legislation which is meant to be particularly targeted towards coronavirus? Now, by the way, let me then stop there and say one thing that may break the logjam is emergency relief funding. Ron will comment a little bit on this, but clearly there's going to be a supplemental appropriations bill for Hurricane Laura, but also for California wildfires. So it may be that can at least get some things going that will bring relief for those affected by coronavirus. One of your questions was regarding the tax liability on forgiven loans. And Mnuchin so far has been opposed to forgetting. He says, you're supposed to get the PPP if you had a loss, and so it should be a wash. If you didn't have a loss, but you still got the loan, then you're getting a twofer, if you will, free money, but you never had a loss. So it may be that for loans below a certain value, say below $150,000, there will be some treatment that is different from those loans, which is above $150,000. Katie, let me go to you next and then go to Ron and see what you would add to what I had to say.
I have been out for the last 2 weeks and I'm just back today. So I'm unbearing my email and trying to get up to speed on everything as quickly as possible. So I will defer to Ron, who might have a little more insight that I don't currently.
Katie just got married, so cut her slack. She was on her honeymoon.
Congratulations.
Hey, Ron, go ahead.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, this is, Ron, I mean, obviously the state of play is obviously very fluid. I mean, I know you guys are, the good news is there will be PPP money, funds in whatever final agreement is reached. Now it remains less certain whether they will do Restaurant Act or an industry incentive package for a specific industry. So that amount that remains to be determined. But I know with the PPP program, I know the restaurant folks have expressed concern about what was in the HEROES Act, particularly in terms of the requirement of a 50% revenue loss to be eligible for the second round of PPP loans. We have expressed that concern to Rubio's staff, and I'm sure as your Matt and the national team have seen, the most recent skinny bill only requires a 35% revenue loss to be eligible for those funds. So obviously, we're negotiating in negotiations with Democrats. That number might even drop more, and there might be more flexibility in those accounts. So we are cognizant of the concerns of the restaurant industry that not that many will qualify the higher the amount of revenue losses that you have to show. So we're working on that. Obviously, another round of EIDL funding is important. There's a number of other tax provisions besides what the senator mentioned that is likely to be part of it. Obviously, there's broad support for enhancing the employee retention tax credit and work opportunity tax credit. So those are likely to be part of the mix. But obviously, the negotiations are very much in a state of play, and looks like everything is going to get, in all likelihood, is going to get tied up to this end of the year continuing resolution, which will incorporate not just the COVID-19 relief package, but also the end of the year appropriations package and other extenders like the surface transportation bill and other measures. And but at the end of the day, there's going to be pressure to build a deal. Nobody's going to want to shut the government down. So I'm pretty confident that there will be some strong provisions and flexibility in the PPP program at the end of the day. So having said that, I mean, I can answer more specifics if you have more specifics that you want us to go into, but obviously it's still a work in progress.
Matt, do you have anything to add on any of this?
I think that the senator and the staff hit it well. First, I do want to say thank you for those of you back home. I know that you see your senator, you know him well. You have a unique relationship with him. That's fantastic. I can tell you from the DC perspective, the senator and his staff have been unbelievably open and responsive for many years before this crisis. Every time we've gone to the office, you've been accessible, and we appreciate everything that you've done over the years and your staff, and appreciate the relationship that we fostered over that period of time. On the PPP, it's a huge issue for us to try to get those fixes in place. The tax deductibility piece is a major concern for our members, because people have to remember that 60% at least of what you're spending in PPP funds has to be on payroll. And when you're spending that much on payroll for employees that oftentimes you wouldn't have even kept on payroll, we need to get as much value from those PPP funds as possible. So that's one. We definitely appreciate the reduction from 50% down to 35%. That was a big step in the right direction, and something that we appreciate the work that you did with Rubio and others on that as well.
Also, I just want to say thank you for co-sponsoring the Senate's Restaurant Act. And Matt had insight for me earlier on the difference, if he wants to tell the group the difference between the House version and the Senate version.
Sure, and this is probably something that would be helpful for you and your staff to know, not only in terms of the Restaurants Act and this bill, but in terms of future legislation and other pieces. We as an association have resisted any efforts that would treat a restaurant differently based on the name on the door. We want all restaurants that are similarly situated to be treated similarly. And speaking in terms of the bill, the Restaurant Act itself, the House version of the bill makes a key distinction. What it would do is say that only independent restaurants can participate in the program, which means that if you are a franchisee, even if you're very small, you could own just one single unit and have very little revenues, that you would be excluded, even though other independents that may have multiple restaurants would be able to participate. And our take is we represent independents and franchisees and chains. They're all equally deserving. They're all facing unique problems. And if there's ever distinctions that need to be made for restaurants, our preference is to make distinctions based on other factors that could apply to both, rather if it be revenue thresholds or the number of employees, or there's a lot of different ways, but not to treat someone different based on the name on the door. The Senate version got it right, and we're happy with that. We worked very closely with Senators Wicker and Sinema, but that's a good thing for you to know. Not only is it difficult for our members, but it splits the industry, and it makes the likelihood of passage much less when you've got an industry that's split because there's people that are treated inequitably. So something to think about in the future.
You're muted, Senator Cassidy.
Thank you. Yeah, as you know, in our original, the original version that passed, restaurants and hotel chains did allow franchisees to be treated separately. Clearly, this is somewhat of a reaction on Democrats' part to the perception that a couple major chains, which were quite profitable both individually and in the aggregate, somehow got advantage that they shouldn't have gotten. To your point, Matt, that it would be better to have a way to address that in terms of profitability status, which I think our bill now does, as opposed to merely the ownership status. So we're with you on that.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Senator Cassidy? If you do, you can unmute your line or comments. Melvin, Peter, Paul.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Senator Cassidy, for joining us today. We truly appreciate it. I echo Matt's comments. I think one of the things that is a sleeper that could really hurt us is the deductibility of these forgiveness of the loans that have been forgiven. I don't think people realize the implication that's out there. And I understand that, you know, Secretary Mnuchin looks at it as double dipping, and I'm not trying to be funny right now, but we need the opportunity to double dip. And I've run the calculations on my end, and I know what my losses will be for the year, and the delta between how much would be forgiven and what my losses will be and what my tax ramifications will be. And it basically just puts me right back at ground zero once I file taxes. And we just, it's going to be a substantial blow to people, and it's going to be insult to injury because I don't think they're expecting it. And the fact that the bill was dynamically scored to include forgiveness, and that he's choosing to try to catch back, if you will, is disheartening, to say the least, because we need all the help that we can get. So that's one of the biggest things. And then from there, I just, you know, have faith that y'all are going to keep pushing and hopefully get this skinny bill through on the additional round of PPP, and whether or not we can get, you know, the Cinema Wicker version of the Restaurants Act bill passed, that would be spectacular. But one thing or the other, you know, either another round of PPP or, you know, something that pushes the hand of the House passing the Restaurants Act would be great. And I know that y'all are in a difficult spot from a calendar standpoint, but we are all in a really difficult spot right now as well. And we find ourselves up against the clock.
Totally with you on that, Melvin. One thing we've heard is that rank and file Democrats don't like the fact that Pelosi is holding everything hostage. And clearly she carved out the post office issue from other issues, which is to say that, you know, she could make PPP the same priority as the postal unions. And so there is a hope that as y'all are lobbying across the nation, you can hope that if you continue to lobby those Democrats who represent districts won by President Trump, which is to say they're more moderate, that they would advocate with Ms. Pelosi that she just be a little bit more, less my way or the highway, and a little bit more, well, if you carve out the Postal Service, can we also carve out PPP? I'd be all for that.
That would be
Anyone else
nice.
have any questions? Yeah.
This is Katie from Senator Cassidy's office. I'm just going to echo what Matt said about the importance of industry being united. I have seen so many times where that really makes all the difference. So I think Matt's, you know, thoughts there are just spot on with how important that's going to be.
Anyone else have any questions for the senator? You can unmute your line. Hearing none, any final thoughts?
Could I just ask the senator real quick?
Oh, sure.
I just, Senator, do you have any feel for timing on action by the Congress?
Ralph, I'll ask Ron for his take in a second. We go back in on September the 8th. Ideally, we would have finished all this. We would have been called back in early, but that has not happened. We do have a continuing resolution, which is a temporary budget that extends for a few months at a time, or sometimes just a few weeks at a time, that we have to pass to keep the government funded. So maybe that some of this gets rolled into the continuing resolution. everything gets easier after November the 3rd. Because after November the 3rd, people are no longer playing politics to try and win the presidency or to take the Senate. Rather, they just know we have a deadline, which is the end of the year, and they begin to work in earnest. I'm sorry to say that it may be, it won't be the week we get back. Let me put it that way. Not that something is sent to the president's desk to sign. That most likely will be later September or early October, or maybe even a little bit later. And I'm saying that with not pleasure because you guys are hurting. Ron, what would you add to all that?
It was pretty much on point. There's just not enough time to reconcile the two bills in order to do a coronavirus relief bill separately from the CR. I mean, they'd have to reach an agreement that first week we're back in session. And my guess is there'll still be posturing. And if nothing's done and that first week we go in session, then as the senator indicated, everything's going to likely bottle up to the end of the year continuing resolution. That's going to be a grab-all package for everybody's agenda. And my guess is it'll be closer to a skinny bill. I mean, it'll be maybe it'll be $1.5 trillion. But who knows? But the point is, after the election, if depending on who wins power, there may be an opportunity to do more things. But in the short term, everything's going to probably get pushed into this into a continuing resolution. So, but the negotiations, because the House and Senate haven't really entered in, the appropriations committees and the relevant authorizing committees haven't been given free rein to negotiate among themselves. Once they get the green light from Meadows and Pelosi, it's going to take them about a week, a good week or so, just to try to negotiate the fine points when they are given the green light on an overall dollar amount. So that by itself tells you it's probably going to be in a continuing resolution at the end of September or maybe even going into the first week of October.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Ralph.
Well, I'm going to encourage all of you to visit restaurantsact.com. And if you have not contacted your congressman, not Senator Cassidy, but maybe your other ones, please go there and review the Blueprint for Restaurant Revival. There's a summary and an extended version, and it captures all the things that the industry has indicated would be helpful as it seeks to recover from the COVID crisis. And if you have no more questions, we're right at 3:45, and to respect the senator's time, we'll let him go to his next meeting, which I'm sure is starting at any second now. So thank you for your time today. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can email communications@lra.org, and we'll communicate those to the senator's staff and seek you an answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you all.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.